Pray. Dear God, as we move into your words, I pray that you give me wisdom because I need it. I pray that as I talk about something so profound that you would give me the ability to communicate it and people would see past me to see you. In Jesus' precious and holy name, amen. We're just want to let you know up front that there'll be people that would love to pray for you. So after the service, if you feel comfortable, just come on up and let some wonderful people pray for you. We are in the 5th week of a series about real God, and what we've been talking about, the first week, I got to talk to you about how God is personal, and he cares about you, and he wants to have a relationship with you. He's not cold. He's not distant. Then Pastor Dan talked about how God is good, which means he has your best interest at heart, and he has my best interest at heart. Then we talked about God's sovereignty, which means he is in control. He's powerful. All of his plans will come to fruition. Last week, Pastor Dan talked about holiness and talked about how God is set apart, unique, awesome, and worthy of following. Today, I get to talk to you about wisdom, and wisdom has to do with God understands me completely, he understands you completely, and he also knows how life works in the real world. This last week, I got to spend some time with my daughter. And my daughter's 20 years old, and she has an uncanny ability to point out to me how often I am extremely old. In fact, we went to a movie together, and she made it known that she said, "Hey, Dad, I want you to look around and notice that you are older than anyone else in this entire theater." I love this verse that I want us to read here. It's the glory of young men is their strength, gray hair, the splendor of the old. We may not be strong, but at least we're wise. There's something about being old that has to do with wisdom. There's something about being old that has to do with maturity. At least, if nothing else, being old means that you've messed up and you've made poor choices and you've got to experience the consequences of those decisions, and now you get to carry that pain with you so that you can factor that in as you make decisions in the future. There's only one thing more painful than being old, and that's being old without maturity. All of us know people who have gotten old, and along the way, they haven't gained any wisdom. They don't do life any differently. They're still making the same mistakes that they've made all along. There's something painful about being old and having gray hair and not having wisdom. I love this verse in Proverbs 16, is gray hair is a crown of splendor, but the only way that happens is if we allow ourselves to live a righteous life and do the kind of things that God desires of us. I learned firsthand how painful the lack of wisdom can be. I was 17 years old, and I had this crush on this girl named Nancy. Nancy was everything. She was just absolutely amazing. And one day, I called her up on the phone. You got to remember, back when I was in high school, they used to have a phone that was plugged into the wall, and you would talk to it on a cord. So I called her up, and as soon as she answered, I started talking to her on the phone. We had a pretty cool, casual conversation about a lot of little things like sports, weather. We talked about music. We talked about controlling parents and how obnoxious they were. We talked about some of our friends and the unwise choices that they were making. About 25 minutes into the conversation, I actually said Nancy's name. And that person on the other end of the phone just calmly said to me, "This is not Nancy, this is her mother." I was mortified. I was in complete shock. In fact, it was probably 2 minutes before I could form any words because all I could think about was all of the stupid things I said to the mom of the girl that I had a crush on. I learned an incredibly powerful lesson that day, and this is the lesson I learned. You always find out who you're speaking with before you say anything. You always find out who you're speaking with before you say anything. Today we're going to talk about wisdom, and I want to start at the beginning, and there's one thing that's crucial, that's essential, that we make sure that we catch before we talk about wisdom. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. I want us to catch this. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and the knowledge of the Holy One is about understanding. True wisdom begins with the fear of the Lord. The term can be translated dread, being terrified, standing in awe, or having reverence. The word captures both aspects of shrinking back in fear and drawing close in awe. It's not a trembling dread that paralyzes action, but neither is it a polite reverence. We fear the Lord when we properly acknowledge who God is and offer Him all that He deserves. Knowing God and giving Him His rightful place in our lives is the foundation and essence of wisdom. It is impossible to make wise decisions if we don't start at the proper place of understanding God. As I looked up wisdom and I thought about it for a while, the primary and most frequently used word in the Old Testament for wisdom is chokmah. And if you want to get it right, you have to have this like guttural sound. In the New Testament, it's Sophia. The word wisdom occurs 45 times just in the book of Proverbs alone. It's used for the skill of craftsmen, sailors, singers, mourners, administrators, and counselors. These people were knowledgeable, able, and experienced in their specific area of expertise. There's something about knowledge, but knowledge isn't enough. There's something about understanding, which is to take knowledge and to be able to understand the meaning of it, which is even better. But when you have wisdom, you're able to take knowledge and experience and be able to apply both of them to real life. Have you ever thought about what makes a person wise? Have you ever processed about what is the difference between a wise person and a fool? A wise person has the ability to see beyond the present circumstances. They have the ability to be able to comfort you, give you guidance and insight because they understand things on a significantly deeper level. How do you know if you're wise? Have you ever thought about that? About if you're wise? I would say that the first principle has to do with humility, and wise people know who to trust with the most unsettling questions and difficult circumstances. If you think that you are in control of the universe and that you're in charge of all of the outcomes in your life, you, by very nature, don't have any wisdom. The beginning of wisdom starts with putting God in His proper place where He is God and you are not. The beginning of wisdom is when you know that you're not God. There's three characters in the book of Proverbs that the Bible warns us about, and they have different levels of being dangerous. And as I talk in this sermon, what I would like you to do is think about which one of the characters do you best, or which one is the closestly and most accurately represents you. First, there's the simple. They're the least dangerous. They live without thinking. They're too lazy to change. They're short-sighted. They're not always motivated to listen. And not only are they not always motivated to listen, they are clueless. And they're just naive. If you're 21 and under, most likely you fit this category. It's not because you're not smart. It's not because you're not wise. It's just you haven't had enough experience to be able to factor pain into the equation. Fools are different. They can be very smart people. They have made a conscious decision to make their own choices independent of God. A fool knows what is right, but is choosing to do it anyway. The most often thing you'll hear from a fool is, I don't care. You'll be able to come up to them and say, hey, don't you realize if you do this, then this is what will happen, and here's what they'll say to you. I know, but I don't care. A fool is dangerous because they don't care about themselves. They're likely to cause you pain just by being in their presence, and Proverbs warns us about that. The last category has to do with mockers and scoffers. And mockers and scoffers don't normally come to church. But all of us know people like that. A mocker and a scoffer, they're the most dangerous of all. They rebel against God, and in their pride, they openly oppose God and even mock His advice. They despise, belittle, hold in contempt, and ridicule. And some of you have friends who are mockers, and when you go up to them, you're very careful what you share because you know they're going to ridicule you for the things that you believe and the choices that you make. And there's something about a mocker that you cannot even give them advice because no matter how expressive you are, no matter how sound your logic is, they are still going to cast aside because they know better than you do. God is the ultimate source of wisdom. He's able to combine knowledge, experience, and understanding in a profound way. God is the source of wisdom. I love this definition. It's written by a guy named A.W. Tozier. And it is powerful and it's profound. And I'm going to read it to you, and I want you to just let it soak in as I read it. Wisdom, among other things, is the ability to devise perfect ends and to achieve those ends by the most perfect means. It sees the end from the beginning, so there can be no need to guess or conjecture. Wisdom sees everything in focus, each in proper relation to all, and is thus able to work towards predestined goals with flawless precision. All God's acts are done in perfect wisdom, first for his own glory, and then for the highest good of the greatest number for the longest time. I want you to catch this. When wisdom is taking place, it's for the highest good, the greatest number for the longest period of time. And all God's acts are pure as they are wise. And as good as they are wise and pure, not only can his acts not be better done, a better way to do them could not even be imagined. Chip Ingram took A.W. Tozer's definition and simplified it down to this. God will bring about the best possible result by the best possible means for the most people for the longest possible time. Is that true? Is it true that there is an all-wise God that's able to bring about the best possible circumstances for the greatest amount of people for the longest period of time? And I'm going to present a couple cases, and I want you to think about it. What about if your health starts to go bad? What happens if you're the one that gets cancer? What happens if your relationships are beginning to be chaotic and other people in your life are making unbelievably unwise choices and it's causing you incredible pain? Is God still wise then? You see, what ends up happening to us is we're perfectly capable of seeing a wise, powerful God, but when our circumstances don't match up to our expectations, then we start to question God's wisdom. I want you to consider that maybe there is a God, and maybe he knows slightly more than you and I do. I want to read a section of Proverbs. In fact, I want to give you an assignment. If you would go home and read Proverbs chapter 8, 9, and 10, because in a sense, it's a treatise to wisdom, and it gives you all of the benefits of wisdom. And I only have about 20 minutes to talk to you, and I'm not going to even be able to scratch the surface of what takes place in this passage, but I want to give you a couple ideas to sit with. Before God made the world or its fields or any of the dust of the earth, that's wisdom, was there. When he sent the heavens in place, when he marked out the horizon on the face of the deep, when he established the clouds above fixed securely in the fountains of the deep, when he gave the sea its boundaries so waters could not overstep his command. God was ordering things, designing things, creating in such a way that things were not able to overstep the way that he designed them to be. I love verse 30. It says, "Then I was constantly at his side," wisdom was, "and I was filled with delight day after day, rejoicing always in God's presence, rejoicing in his whole world and delighting in mankind." You see, God created the world in such a way that he is not only able to set things in perfect place, but able to take them when they start to get out of whack and put them back in a way that's unbelievably profound and is the best for every person involved. I want to take you to 1 Corinthians chapter 2 and let you see how Paul articulates the same idea. Did you know that there's two kinds of wisdom? There's the wisdom of the world and the wisdom of God. There's the wisdom of this age, and then there's the wisdom that God understands. Not that long ago, I was trying to undo a screw, and as I grew up, I always learned that righty-tighty, lefty-loosey, right? If you want to tighten something, you turn it to the right. If you want to loosen it, you turn it to the left. Well, I came across a reverse screw, and I didn't have enough wisdom to know that this screw was not undone by turning it to the left. The only way you could undo it is turning it to the right. So I kept unturning it and turning it and turning it, and finally I got so much force that I snapped the screw. It was only after I talked to somebody who was significantly more mechanical than me that I understood that some screws don't go to the right, they actually go to the left. I want us to think about it for just a second, that maybe the way that the world we're presently living in might just be turned the wrong way. Instead of it being right side up, maybe it's kind of upside down. You see, in God's kingdom, as weird as this sounds, the way up is down. The way to rule is to serve. The way to experience unbelievable wealth is to acknowledge your own spiritual poverty. There's something about the way that God works that's different than the way that the wisdom of this world works. And if we're not careful, we're going to constantly be fighting against something, turning it the way that we think it should work. But no matter how hard we turn, it never works just because we don't see it from the right angle and we don't understand all of the things involved in the process. In 1 Corinthians chapter 2, Paul says this, "We do, however, speak of a message of wisdom among the mature. There is wisdom for the mature, but not the wisdom of this age or of the rulers of this age who are coming to nothing. No, we declare God's wisdom, a mystery that has been hidden and that God destined for our glory before time began. None of the rulers of this age understood it, for if they had, they would not have crucified the Lord of glory. However, as it is written, what no eye has seen, what no ear has heard, what no human mind has conceived. There's something that God's doing that you cannot see with your eyes, you cannot grasp with your ears, and you can't even understand it with your mind. But God is doing something profound for people that love Him. God is prepared for those who love Him. These are the things God has revealed to us by His Spirit. The Spirit searches all things, even the deep things of God." What difference would it make if we believe that God will bring about the best possible result by the best possible means for me? What would happen if, in humility, I acknowledged that I don't know everything? What if I just gave the possibility that maybe God knows something more than I do? What if I were to just consider, okay, God, maybe the circumstances that I'm presently facing, even though I don't like them, you are working behind the scenes to accomplish something that only these circumstances could accomplish. And you could not achieve the means that you're looking for by any other strategy. And you, in your sovereignty and your goodness and your wisdom, are working in my life in ways that you're trying to accomplish something. Now, some of you that are sick and some of you that know people that have cancer, it's hard to imagine how a wise, sovereign, good God could use cancer to accomplish something beyond what He could do any other way. Now, here's something I'm going to read a couple times, and I want you to sit with, okay? As soon as a person admits they don't know everything, then they are in position to learn something. As soon as a person admits that they do not know everything, then they're in position to learn something. At Covenant Pines, we do this thing called Work and Worship, and I'm not going to call out who it was, but I was working with one of my friends that just happens to be on staff here. And unfortunately, I've had the privilege of doing drywall for like over 40 years, so I have just say a little bit of experience. This particular staff person had been doing drywall for about 6 minutes. And in the 6 minutes that he had experience, he was telling me how things needed to work. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm pretty sure that I've learned a couple things over the years that will make this make way more sense that you just haven't learned yet. I want to ask you a question. Have you ever said to God that He has no idea what's going on? Have you ever looked at your circumstances and then applied it to God's wisdom and said, God, you don't even know what's happening? Could it be possible that God knows more than you do? Is it possible that God just sees other factors beyond your ability to comprehend? I remember as a young Christian reading Job for the first time, and as I was reading Job, Job was suffering intensely. And then he started peppering God with all these questions. And God patiently listened to his questions and then just started asking him a couple questions of his own. And he said, hey, Job, where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? Job, where were you when I set the heavens in place so that the clouds could stay up on their own? Is it possible that there is a wise God and he's doing something in your circumstances beyond your ability to comprehend? You see, for most of us, we have two high priorities. One is our happiness, and number two is our comfort. If I read the scripture, those two don't even make God's top 10. Who is wise and understanding? I love James because James cuts right down to the heart of it, and he gets at, in a practical way, how we can live this out in real life. Who is wise and understanding among you? Let him show it by their good life, deeds done in humility. Basically, the beginning of wisdom is humility that comes from wisdom. But if you harbor bitter envy and selfish ambition in your hearts, do not boast about it or deny the truth. Such wisdom doesn't come down from heaven, but is earthly, unspiritual, demonic. If you're living your life to elevate yourself and you're holding on to bitterness and resentment, don't brag about it. Because what you're trying to present is not only not wise, it's just plain stupid. For where you have envy and selfish ambition, there will find disorder in every evil practice. But the wisdom that comes from heaven is, first of all, pure, peace-loving, considerate, submissive, full of mercy. And I want to point something out as I'm highlighting this, because I'm going to get to it in a little bit. And good fruit, impartial and sincere, peacemakers who sow in peace reap a harvest of righteousness. He's laying the groundwork that there's something that you do now that you get to reap the benefits of later. What James is talking about, we're going to go back to Proverbs in a few minutes, is if you pursue certain things, you'll not only not get them, but you'll experience pain and heartache and misery. But if you pursue something else, then the outcome of that will actually be what you truly want. We'll develop that idea in a minute. But right now, I want to focus on the second principle. The first one is about humility, in that if you're wise, then what you realize is that you don't have all the answers. And maybe there's a God that you can trust beyond yourself. And wise people start with the fact that there is a God. The second principle I kind of want to lay out and I want you to consider is wise people know what to hold on to and what to release. There's something weird about us in that we will hold on tightly to that which will destroy us, and we will let go of that which would truly bring us life. A wise person knows what to hold on to and what to release. Let me give you an example, okay? One of the things you should release is bitterness and resentment, because the longer you hold on to them, the more miserable you will become. Some of you have some expectations of how life should be, and you have some expectations of how your kid should perform. And the longer you hold on to those expectations, the more miserable you are in all of your relationships. You see, what I would argue is that wise people hold on to God's character and the fact that he can be trusted, and they release the bitterness and the resentment, and they end up becoming a lot happier. Wise people will take the idea that they are right and release that idea so that they can get something significantly higher, which is closeness and connection. But a foolish person will take an argument, and they will fight to the death to prove that they are right, and they will hold on to the idea that I am right at the expense of the relationship. Did you know that you can be right or you can be connected, but you can rarely ever do both? See, wise people know what to hold on to and what to release. Wise people hold on to the things that bring life and release the things that would bring them death. I don't have time to develop all of Proverbs, but I'm going to develop two ideas here because they're profound. Does not wisdom call out? Does not understanding raise her voice? And what wisdom is, it's personified in a woman, and she's in an imaginary way out in the streets so that you can hear her calling. And what she does is at the highest point along the way, where the paths meet, she takes her stand. Besides the gate leading into the city, at the entrance she cries out. Basically, at all of the important places in real life where normal people will be found, wisdom calls out and says, I'm available to you. And the reason I chose this verse is because I want you to see that it's available to all mankind. It's not esoteric. It's not hidden. It's available to every single one of us. Listen, For I have a trustworthy thing to say. I open my lips to speak what is right. My mouth speaks what is true. My lips detest wickedness. All my words of my mouth are just. None of them are crooked and perverse. You can trust me because what I have to say is actually true. Verse 10. Choose my instructions instead of silver, knowledge rather than gold. Now, the author of Proverbs is going to present an idea that's going to take you some thinking to be able to process, okay? What he's going to say is that normally what we do is we pursue wealth, we pursue happiness, and we pursue peace of mind. But he says if you pursue those things, then you will not only not experience them, but you'll end up at a different destination. But if you choose to pursue wisdom, then all three of those will be an outcome. And watch how powerful he says this. Choose my instruction instead of silver, knowledge rather than choice gold. If you get instruction and knowledge, it will be better than having silver and gold. For wisdom is more precious than rubies. I want you to catch this, that wisdom is worth more to you than any amount of money you could ever make. And we all know it's true. You've been around people who are older and they don't have any wisdom. And all of life is miserable. I, wisdom, dwell together with prudence. I possess knowledge and discretion. To fear the Lord is to hate evil. I hate pride and arrogance. Back to that same idea that you need humility to be able to even experience it. Counsel and sound judgment are mine. It is an outcome. It's a result. It's something you get as a result of having wisdom, not something you get by trying to attain. I have insight. I have power. By me, kings reign and rulers issue decrees that are just. If you're looking to have influence over someone else, I would argue that the path to get there is to pursue wisdom, and the outcome of that wisdom will be influence. I love those who love me, and those who seek me will find me. With me, that's wisdom, are riches, honor, enduring wealth, and prosperity. My fruit, the end result of having wisdom, is better than fine gold. What I yield surpasses choice silver. I walk in the way of the righteous, along the paths of the justice, bestowing a rich inheritance on those who love me and making their treasure full. I want you to just catch the end, that you get blessing by attaining wisdom. And it will not only bring you life, but will help you to avoid death. How do you know if you're wise? You have the humility to trust someone who's significantly wiser than you are. You know what to hold on to and what to release, but wise people know where to find happiness, wealth, and lasting peace. You see, with happiness, wealth, and lasting peace are the outcome of a life lived in wisdom. They are the end result. They are the fruit of. If you pursue wisdom, then you'll gain all of that. Now, I'm going to apply this to a normal situation in life. Some of you want your family members to meet all your needs, right? You want your family members to be there so that they make sure that you're happy. And I guarantee if you go to your family members and try to extract happiness out of them, you'll not only won't experience lasting peace and satisfaction, but you will be disconnected and miserable. But if you attain wisdom and you choose to serve the people in your lives, they will want to be around you. They will not only want to be around you, but they will want to go to you to be the one who gives them advice. As I wind down the sermon and as we close out for this morning, are you willing to pursue wisdom? Are you naive and you just haven't had the experience to know that you need it? Some of you, it's a matter of the will. And you know what's right, but you're blocking it off anyway. And some of you are convinced you know way more than God. Aren't you open to wisdom? You see, a wise person has the humility to admit that someone far smarter and more intelligent than them is navigating the circumstances and has their best interest at heart. A wise person releases the things that would cause them misery, like bitterness and resentment, and holds on to God's character. And a wise person is willing to pursue wisdom, which will ultimately be the outcome of peace, prosperity, and eternal happiness. Dear Heavenly Father, give the wisdom to go past what we see in the moment to what we truly want. God, I pray that we would be able to see your heart and trust you and have the patience to make the choices that will give us the outcomes that we desire. God, I am so grateful that you offer wisdom to us. Help us to take these gray hairs and allow them to be a crown of your glory. In Jesus' precious and holy name, amen.